IVM.
There's a quick survey to fill out on ivmpodcast.com/survey. It lets us know a little bit more about who's listening to us. And you know what? We're going to do a few prizes. So, we'll do a random drawing of maybe 10 people and we'll send you all some swag. Remember, that's ivmpodcast.com/survey where you can fill out the survey.
Welcome to Think Fast, where I think I am going to be the next brand ambassador for Vimal Pan Masala. What are you going to take on, Suchita? Are you going to also advertise Vimal Pan Masala? What is that? Zuba mein elaichi, what kesar, whatever that is. But I like those ads. What's the problem? Do you find it to be a problem?
But what was the problem? I totally missed
Have you not seen it?
I totally missed this Akshay Kumar cacophony on Twitter.
Have you not seen the Pan Masala?
Of course, like the old school.
Like how there's the Marvel Cinematic Universe, there is the Pan Masala
Correct.
Cinematic Universe. It first had Ajay Devgan, then got Shah Rukh Khan. Next had I'm a sucker for these random stupid things, but Akshay Kumar gets out of a car. There's randomly one woman with a huge saber and she chops off the top of the Pan Masala packet and that falls into his mouth. I'm like, that's cinematicness
God.
at its core. So much fun.
Jesus. Don't you remember they had Pierce Brosnan also endorsing one of these? Manik Chand, Unche Log, Unchi Pasand.
And he sued them because he was told it's a mouth freshener. He wasn't told it was a Pan Masala.
Oh my God.
So he sued them, which is why, because he didn't know that is what it was. He thought it's a random ad for a mouth freshener.
Why are Indians so notorious for basically, in Delhi parlance, we say, see katna, right? And I'm assuming our listeners can join the dots there. But this week has been a little nutso, man. We were going to be talking about the Sequoia letter later on in the episode.
Yeah.
But even, that had a few elements of founders either not being fully transparent or not being fully on board with certain requirements that their board members have. So a lot of this seems to be, unfortunately, almost becoming associated with us, which kind of sucks. I want to give you this example. A friend of mine, who's based in the US, wanted to move to India for a job. He, she, they, I can't disclose anything. They're in technology. And they actually spoke with one of the partners at one of the top VCs in Silicon Valley. And the first piece of advice that they got was, verify the numbers of the company that they're joining, because there is this weird notion that, unfortunately, or for whatever the reason may be, Indians aren't really the best at being honest. So sucks for us, man. Sucks for us.
Yeah. Sports channel wars are going to start now. Reliance started Sports 18. It's going to be a fun time. I'm waiting for all the bids to happen. I always enjoy bids because I'm just watching. I'm not bidding. But
Nice.
It's going to be interesting to see how the sports ecosystem kind of evolves with that. And there's also a lot of action happening. As always, there's acquisitions. There are investments. Bunch of stuff happened there as well, right?
Yep. And so Nykaa has, the news came out this morning. They've bought or invested in 3 companies, Kika, an athleisure wear company, one of your nutraceutical type brands, and also Earth
Gummies.
Rhythm, which is a popular, lots of gummies, and Earth Rhythm, which is a popular, skincare and makeup. I think they have a bunch of makeup in their portfolio as well. They've also partnered with Aveda to launch hair salons, the first of which opened in Bangalore. So Nykaa sort of, back in the news. Axis is making money moves after their Citibank handshake. They're also shaking hands with Slice, which is super interesting. So more happening in the fintech space, which we guys have spoken about, a bunch of times before. But acquisitions are continuing, man, all galore.
Yeah, and there's a bunch more to talk about. But what we talk about this week is Netflix is going through a bit of a downturn here and might actually be considering advertising. So we're going to talk about that, which is, and considering the fact that they've always said they would never do advertising, they finally might be doing advertising. So that's one. We're also going to dig into the fact that there's a lot of this is interesting article from the cap table about D2C startups, which I think is a good one to kind of talk about, primarily because how that business is kind of shaping up right now. I know you're getting into how celebrities investing into startups. There seems to be, I think who are the biggest angel investors in town seem to always be celebrities these days.
We're talking about Cashify.
There's Cashify, and I think I will also move to Dubai because I think Dubai seems to be where everybody's going. Web3 is going there. I will go there and start Web4 before Web3 is over. So keeping all of that in mind, that is what we have this week on Think Fast. But before we do anything else, I'm going to go get myself a Vimal Pan Masala and we'll be right back with Think Fast.
Habits? Routines? How exactly do they help us get better?
Well, to simplify it for you, tune in to the Habit Coach podcast. I am Ashton Doctor, and I'm going to be here to help you get better daily with some simple, easy to do habits that you can easily adapt to your life. So tune in to the Habit Coach podcast from Monday to Friday, because I believe that awesome lives start with awesome habits.
Welcome back to Think Fast. Me and Akshay Kumar just had some nice Vimal Pan Masala, and we're ready for our first story. Am I doing the first story? Are you doing the first story, Suchita?
You kick it off, brother. Netflix.
I will kick it off. So Netflix has always said, and one of the big differentiators was they start this whole trend of non-ad driven streaming and content. But last few years, competition's kind of really gone up. They just had their earnings report. They have like a downslope on subscriptions. I mean, the share price went down like crazy. And Reed Hastings finally said he might consider an ad-supported platform. I mean, lots more details here, but first reactions, what do you think?
I mean, I think Netflix is probably having a moment of reckoning, because obviously they were ahead of the curve. But what happens when the curve catches up, right? And now there are just way too many subscription platforms. In fact, we didn't speak about this in our intro, but CNN Plus spent, $300 million in launching CNN Plus. Yeah. They literally shut it down in less than a month of the launch.
But there's a story there. The story there is not necessarily just a subscription problem. It's politics. So CNN's moving under Discovery, right? And I don't know why they started. Basically, the CNN guys said, no, we're going to do this. They moved to Discovery. Discovery, I don't think, wanted them to do this. So basically, like within like less than a month of just like, you can't take a 1 month's numbers and shut something down because... Correct. I mean, so it's supposedly internal politics that shut it down, but it's like, it's a waste of money. But I thought some of the shows might be interesting to catch up.
Like Scott Galloway's. No, but keeping the money spent on this aside, I think the larger thing over here is like how many platforms can a person have, right? Yeah. Because now you've got everyone from like HBO Max to, I mean, even in India, man, in between Sony Max, Amazon Prime Video, who you don't want to qualify as a streaming platform, but there's just way too much. And the truth is there isn't that much good content to warrant subscription, off of so many platforms. So move to advertising, or even if they figure something else out, right? Like tiered subscriptions or, whatever else. I think Netflix is having that moment where they've just realized that, they were ahead of the curve, but now they've kind of flatlined with it. So what moves they make next will be interesting.
I think there are two other points to this, right? One is the fact that Netflix content, their shows, at least in recent times, nothing's really, I mean, apart from Bridgerton, which I know you hated the second season, but they've had very few shows or movies that really blew out as much as they would in the early days of Netflix, because everybody else is also creating quality content as well. So are they almost hitting that, okay, we're getting something which everybody can watch a little bit too much and not necessarily, if you look at the ones who did well, there was Bridgerton on one end, there was Squid Game a while back. Some not necessarily the most mainstream of shows, but have done actually really well in that sense. On the other end, what might also, I mean, I know that they spoke about it in the earnings report as well, is that there's a huge number of people who share their Netflix passwords with each other. Yeah. They're actually planning to do a crackdown on that, which, I mean, I guess makes sense for a business to do, but I don't know how they would do it and how people will react to it.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I'll push back on slightly is I think the interesting thing with the internet at large, and this is borrowed from this really good article by Rex Woodbury called The Internet's Killed Mainstream Culture. And basically that article was written in light of the Oscars, right? And if you look at the Oscars, earlier your Oscar winners were like box office hits, right? So Titanic, for example, won an Oscar, was a box office hit. You see the same with Avatar and the likes. And now a lot of what you're seeing happen with the Oscars is almost like the Oscars have become like your last bastion of like acknowledging that independent films exist, and you see it through like Coda and a bunch of others that won Nomadland. Like the movie is super zany,
Power of the Dog,
exactly, and very slow, and wouldn't have seen much success had they sort of gone down the theater route. But the point that I'm making over here is I think the great thing that Netflix has been able to do, especially through shows like Queen's Gambit, Sex Education, Squid Games and the likes, is really tap into internet culture, right? Which is mainstream but within niches. So I don't know if they have a programming issue. Because, sure, they may not have blockbuster hit after blockbuster hit, but the truth is they have enough shows which in consortium have seen enough sort of success happen, even if it's happened within niches. But I really think what it's come down to over here is just optionality, because I mean, look at Apple TV Plus and the kind of programming that they're sort of coming out with. I think the other thing where Netflix has fallen behind is what is their angle on sports, right? We spoke about this even when you guys were talking about Netflix's strategy in India and how they've totally missed the lowest common denominator, which is cricket in our country. So I think, one big, if I had to criticize their programming, it would just be what are your lowest common denominator shows, and because Selling Sunset really can't
Which
be
still
it.
seems to be like Friends, right? They literally Friends is still one of those things that gets the most number of views for them. But you realize now what we've come back to with streaming. We're back to a set-top box cable TV scenario where you have multiple channels. Now we have multiple streaming apps. Yeah. You pay for them individually. Do you subscribe to this on Tata Sky, or I think it's called Tata Play now? It's pretty much the same thing. We're back to square one. We went down like, we will have 1 or 2 streaming platforms.
But
now
that's what always happens, right? Like we spoke about this in the last episode, which is it almost seems like, everything becomes like a rehashed version of what it was before, and you take it from the likes of like Amazon to, being a rehashed version of Sears or Walmart, and everything is just more of the same. But I have a quick question for you. If you had to sort of play like, consultant to Netflix, and I know I asked you this question even when we were discussing India, but globally, what do you think is going right or wrong with Netflix's approach?
I'd say that there's something to learn from Disney Plus. And I feel that what Disney Plus has is that you are creating categories within your content. Like, and I know because they own that IP. So if you look at what Disney Plus is, if I'm a Marvel fan, I'm going to keep consuming all the Marvel shows. They're going to be Star Wars shows. They're also even taking pieces from their own movies and building it out in that sense, right? So you're taking like their offshoots of what was on, let's say, Frozen, and making smaller versions of that. There is literally a video on Disney Plus, which I have played many times, which is one character from the movie Frozen. And that character is running around for an hour, which basically parents can leave on. Kids are going to keep looking at it. For 1 hour, they're stuck watching something which is just random movement. And the character jumping around doing random things. So they've done smart things to categorize. And I feel Netflix doesn't have that core IP that is extendable yet. They've tried to make franchises, but they don't have a franchise. I think that's what they really need as well. Like, if there's Drive to Survive, there is your cricket equivalent. Yeah.
Absolutely. No, Disney's an ecosystem. Amazon is an ecosystem. Actually, one last thing over here that I want to add is if I were Netflix, I'd go balls to wall on gaming. And I know, I think they've made 1 or 2 acquisitions in that space, but really,
and they've started to put smaller games on the platform now.
Correct. And even so, basically, if the problem statement that Netflix always says our competition is sleep, right? What is keeping people up at night without being like weird and like I'm trying to think of the right word without being bleeped out by our editors, but really, what keeps people up at night is games, right? Like that really is the next frontier. But let's see what Netflix does over here.
Speaking of keeping people up at night, one thing which keeps people up at night, celebrities. I don't know why I said that, but I thought I will say it.
Oh my God. Maybe like if you use Cameo or one of those OnlyFans type apps. No, but
see, you took it to a wrong place. I didn't mean it in any bad sense. I baited, you took it.
Took the bait. All for the giggles.
Quickly move ahead.
So basically, guys, startups, if you look at the trajectory of startups and who was investing in startups, it was typically your, HNIs, angel investors, VCs came along, family offices sort of consolidated and started doubling down on startups. You've obviously had super angels. But I think what's really nice to see is how startups have gone mainstream, like they have in the US, where you're seeing celebrities really sort of like get into the game. And obviously in India, there's no dearth, right? Varun Dhawan has invested in Cure Foods. Thea Shetty has invested in Stage 3, where she got the money from is interesting. But Samantha Ruth Prabhu invested in Sustain
Shetty has a lot of money. I'm just like putting it out there.
Oh, she does?
Aditi Shetty is Sunil Shetty's daughter.
I know that, but I meant like I haven't seen any.
Sunil Shetty is a businessman. Anna owns enough businesses to be able to.
Got it. Sara Ali Khan, has invested in the Soul store. And obviously, you've got literally everyone from Tiger Shroff to Deepika Padukone, Jacqueline Fernandez, Shilpa Shetty and the like sort of, putting their money where their mouth is. But my question for you is, what's very interesting when these celebrities make all these announcements is they say that they lend their name. And really where this story came from was Anushka Sharma's investment in Slurp Farm, which was announced this week. And she's also going to be their face. So my question for you, given you come from advertising, is do celebrities really help, or would you just take their money and put their money to use?
Few ways, right? If you look at how this whole thing started off, it started off with just the fact that today I'm a startup who might not be able to pay the daily fee of a celebrity. So you can get like for instance, if I do an equity plus this deal, and you will go back in time, Just Dial and Mr. Bachchan, you're looking at Yatra and Salman Khan. Those are all deals done because your day rate to get a celebrity or an annual endorsement was so high that you give them equity. They're also looking at it, saying, okay, fair enough, I'll take this punt. If it scales up, I make a lot more money. If it doesn't, I've gotten some base level money in anyway. It's always a cash plus equity thing. And in oftentimes, celebrities now have a lot of disposable income to kind of invest into. And they're seeing this as a great way to invest as long as it connects to them as individuals. So because they've also moved from letting the movies build them as celebrities to letting social media build them as celebrities. They have reach, they have, all of that stuff. So if you look at that, do any of these, I mean, apart from the stage 3 one, which I don't really get where the connect really comes from, because, Athiya Shetty's not really made it as an actress or as a celebrity as much as some of the other names here. But I think it makes sense as long as it connects to the celebrity. Does it help make the brand? I think the brand will eventually make the brand, but it's a good vehicle to have as long as they have enough following online. Are they going to be able to push for sale is something which you will only learn over time, which will work for some and not work for some. But just because you follow someone doesn't mean you will buy something which they're kind of a part of. But eventually, I think it will be about the brand. It can't just be about the celebrity, but it helps.
So I don't know, but I think, I was talking to a couple of folks who've sort of spent money on celebrity endorsements, and I think the one feedback that at least I have sort of seen is it leads to a great top of funnel. But because celebrities have all kinds of followers, right? And to be fair, the conversations that I've had have been with, folks who are marketing heads or founders of lifestyle brands, right? So think of brands in the apparel, home decor, plus space. A lot of the feedback that I've got from them is they're great for top of funnel. So you see a lot of traffic coming in through the doors, but the conversion usually sucks. Yeah. So, you see that nice like brand lift, but that brand lift you could have gotten even without a celebrity necessarily, sort of endorsing you. Few successful examples of partnerships like this, for instance, have been Katrina Kaif and what she did with Nykaa through K Beauty, right? Where she invested in Nykaa, also became the face of, K Beauty. And I think she saw an upside of like 20-30 crores, if I'm not mistaken, when, Nykaa went public, right? And Alia Bhatt also obviously put money into Nykaa. On the other end of the sort of like rainbow, you've got Jacqueline Fernandez and obviously, Raw Pressery. I mean, she's not responsible for operations of Raw Pressery, and why businesses succeed or, don't succeed comes down to multiple different factors. But Jacqueline Fernandez, for example, I remember she was going on and on and on about Raw Pressery. But, eventually what ended up happening was they got acquired by Wingreens at, less than ideal terms. Let's just use that as a sort of terminology. I think what's interesting is it's evidently not a guarantor of success by any barometer. Hence, getting money from them makes sense, but I don't know what value their endorsements really lead to.
See, there is something that a celebrity does. I think any known personality does, right? The way you perceive them, in many ways, if it's authentically connected to their personality as a brand, there is that spillover that happens. So, for instance, if you have, let's say, a Shah Rukh Khan doing a thumbs up ad the way he's done, and not even equity, right? Imagine, I'm just looking at it as an ad. There's a natural spillover of personality from person to the product. And as long as you do that, it works in advertising. But I don't think you should assume that they're going to sell product. Selling product in today's world, because people know the difference. People know the difference between an ad and this thing. So, will they sell product? No. Will they build brand personality? Will they build brand identity, etc.? Yes, they will. The other flip side is, if the brand's bad, it comes back onto the celebrity. Again, we spoke about Vimal Pan Masala at the beginning, it happens. On the other end as well, if something happens with the celebrity, it comes back to the brand as well, right?
Yeah. Shilpa Shetty, Mama Earth.
Exactly, right. But you can't assume they're going to sell product. That's not going to happen. It doesn't even happen with YouTubers. One of the interesting things sometime back, because they are now the new celebrities, a YouTuber today putting up a video selling their product gets trolled by their followers. On Instagram, they don't. Yeah. So again, the platforms differ. So it's basically the audience saying, I know you're making money out of this. I know you got an equity. I know you've done all of this stuff. Doesn't mean I'm going to buy it. I'll only buy it if it's good. I'll maybe try it once. But that's pretty much how they look at it.
Gotcha.
Maybe this is where celebrity should actually move into. It is the reselling market. Suchita, I know you are a buyer of new phones every year. You upgrade your phones more often
Ladies and
than
gents,
anybody
Varun is
upgrades their
being
chuddies.
very sarcastic. I am the world's most useless person when it comes to buying phones. I've been using the same OnePlus phone for the past 6 years because I am cheap AF and I like it. But you're talking about Cashify now.
Finally, this year did not upgrade my iPhone after after many years of upgrading my iPhone
Sir,
every
आप
year.
बड़े आदमी हो, हम तो झाड़ू मार रहे हैं यहाँ
Can I
पे.
explain why? Okay, let me explain my logic. This story has a connection to the story we're talking about right now.
Which is?
When you buy an iPhone, let's say it comes for $1 lakh. Right? Right now the iPhone comes for $1 lakh. If you sell it within a year, you get at least 45 to 50% of the money back. Right? So which means, in essence, for that 1 year of usage, you have spent 50,000 rupees for a gadget you use the most. So I break it up month-wise and make myself feel good that I've spent 50,000 rupees in a year.
That is
and I use
stupid, because I spent 50,000 rupees on my OnePlus 5 years ago.
But I have the best,
and used it
but I'm using
for
the best
5
optimum
years.
device.
Oh my God. Best optimum device for your selfies, bro. That's what you actually use phones for.
Yes.
But before I
hair.
keep taking your case, bhai, bata de Cashify ke baare mein.
But so why this selling thing even happened is I've used platforms like Cashify, right? So if Cashify as a product, for instance, I remember the early days when they literally didn't even have a site. You would work off of like a very like base level mobile platform, but there would be a guy coming in, evaluate your phone, check if everything, screen's not cracked, working fine, and then give you money for it. And because of that, over time, I've seen them kind of progress as a platform because I've been a long-term consumer of the brand. And I've actually sold a large part of my phones and even like an old Apple Watch, which I realized I had from the early days of Apple Watches. Always had a great customer experience. Like now the site you can literally
Cashify.
You get to know. Yeah, you can literally go there and give the specifics of your product and you get a price right there. They come and check it and they transfer the money right away. And they've obviously been interesting. There's this whole reseller category of brands which we don't really talk about as much, but it's an interesting one. Globally, obviously, has a lot more noise around this from just the fact that it's more sustainable, etc. But I've always found Cashify to be an interesting model because they've had a nice flow. And in recent times, they were focusing a lot more on profitability.
Yeah.
But they've now suddenly made a move as they're moving to raising more funding as well to really move towards growth a lot more. They're planning to launch a bunch of stores where people can actually kind of go in, get in resold, electronics. They're even kind of building in a service I'm just trying to find that part of it, where you can actually go get your screens repaired, which for any of us who have gotten our screens repaired, you go to the shadiest corners in our cities to get those done. And there is some competition there. But I mean, first, your reactions on what this whole market's like.
So actually, I think it's a very India-centric, marketplace and a model. And I think generally knowing that the Indian customer is very aspirational, knowing that the Indian customer, wants to signal, and generally knowing the second-hand market, I think what they're building out is fantastic. And I'm not saying this just because I know the founders, Mandeep and Nakul, fairly well. They're super, super, super nice guys. But it's not just them, right? Even if you look at, for example, My Spinny, which also is within the Bloom portfolio, one of the investors of Cashify as well, they have done the same thing that Cashify does. And this model is the only model that works in India, right? Not OLX, not these, pure play marketplaces, but really owning quality as a trust sort of barrier in between the seller of the phone, car, whatever else, and the buyer of the secondhand phone, car, or whatever else. So I think what I really like about them is their approach, which is it's not pure marketplace. It's a highly curated, quality control marketplace where the liability of functionality of the device lies somewhere with the middleman, right? Which in this case is Cashify. And like I said, like Spinny does the same thing where if they're buying a car, if, for example, if Varun wants to sell a car and if Suchita wants to buy Varun's second-hand car, Spinny will take the liability to some extent of making sure that Varun's not selling Suchita like, rubbish. And I think it's markets like, it's models like this where there will be scale in India, even if it takes a little bit of time, because someone is basically taking the burden of trust. And I think that's what I like about how Cashify has sort of, gone about their business. It's definitely much more cash intensive because, in pure marketplace models like the eBays of the world, you don't take ownership of anything, right? So if, the buyer has a bad experience, it's on the buyer, you don't. And unfortunately, models like that typically haven't scaled, which is why you've seen e-commerce platforms also do inventory buyouts. And not to bore you with this, but for example, like what was Nykaa's biggest differentiator? Nykaa could say that they are selling authentic Mac or Body Shop or whatever else because they were buying all the inventory up front. And it is in that where, the real delta of customer adoption, customer retention and repeats comes from. So love their model. And honestly, I like the founders as well. So I may be biased.
I think the addition of a few things, that the repair angle is great because you obviously understand the nitty-gritties of all products. So they're not just doing screen repairs. That's what they're starting with. That they also plan to get into camera repairs, batteries, accessories. So I think there's a way for them to kind of scale out that part to also add more revenue streams into their business. But also, from what it seems that Flipkart's really coming in heavy into this one with their Yantra, if I pronounce the
Correct. They acquired a
startup's
company
name right.
called Yantra.
And they're coming into this because obviously for Flipkart, tech and electronics is a huge, it's their biggest focus area as a platform. So it's going to be interesting to see this. I feel more and more of this will happen. I know there've been a lot of startups on the fashion side as well on this front, but electronics kind of makes the most sense.
Yeah.
Because I think with clothes, it's still a little trickier in an Indian context. So
100%. And I think to add to exactly what you've said, right? It is the category where there is natural adoption, unlike, what folks are trying within apparel, where you're trying to build a market, right? I think what Cashify has done is they've gone after a market that already exists. They've just standardized the living daylights out of it. And that standardization is what's actually very, very, very difficult to do.
Yeah. And speaking of markets, you're getting into the D2C space. But before we do that, should we take a break? We should
Yes,
take a break.
Queen. Let's take a break.
Let's take a break and be right back with Think Fast.
Love fighting?
We've got you covered.
Check out our show, The Fighting Goat, where we, the voices of the internet, Arjun Chipalkatti and Somesh Kamra, bring to you crazy weekly action on your favorite combat show, The Fighting Goat.
Be it commentary, breakdown, predictions, analysis of styles and techniques.
And of course, your round of favorite fighters.
You can listen to us every Thursday on the IVM Podcasts App, website, and all major podcast streaming platforms.
Welcome back to Think Fast, where we are talking about our favorite category of products because I like to add stuff to cart all the time. We're talking about D2C.
Yes.
Suchita, what do you have to tell us about D2C?
So, ladies and gents, and I need to bring my energy levels back up, man. I should have 60 cups of coffee in the morning before we record. But obviously, last year Last year was a bumper year for all things direct to consumer, where you saw crazy investments and money from all types of VC flowing into D2C, and Mamaearth was the poster child of all things D2C. But obviously what we've seen happening from December of last year to the first quarter of this year has been a massive consolidation. To be fair, it's not only exclusive to D2C, it's happening across the board. But, ladies and gents, just to give you some examples, Ka has obviously been on a bit of an acquisition spree. They acquired Dot & Key. They acquired a majority stake in Dot & Key just before they went public, and they've acquired about 20% in Earth Rhythm as well. You had a men's grooming brand Beardo that sold its business to Marico a while ago, but you're seeing a lot of Beardo to Marico situations happening, right? So MyGlam, for example, acquired the Momsco. B Blunt was acquired by Mamaearth. I'm using the word acquired too much, but you get the gist, right? So lots of consolidations happening within the D2C space, where last year you just saw stupid amounts of money flowing into direct-to-consumer businesses. And now you're seeing, a lot of investors and founders really reconcile with, was raising that money worth it? Will I be able to show returns on those investments? And really, what are the white spaces that even exist? Because the 100th beauty brand, I don't know what delta they're really going to be able to bring, not just to themselves, but even marketplaces that they sell on. I want to get your first couple of thoughts on this, man, because you're obviously a D2C aficionado. So consolidations, good, bad, bound to happen. What's the sitch?
If you look at globally how this whole beauty market is, especially right on the D2C front, you're seeing the fact that we're still very low in terms of the variety available. If you look globally, there's a lot more there. There are a lot of categories. You easily kind of build yourself a niche and build a solid business. The problem is most D2C brands have built themselves trying to be like a Mamaearth or in that scale of things. If you look at a D2C business as a solid, I'm building a business with core fundamentals, so I can build profits and have it a strong niche. You can easily build 100, 200 crore brand without going massive scale the way a lot of the others are. So even if you see the acquisitions, some of them are those smaller ones. And there's some, for instance, the B Blunt one, which is in many ways, you look at it, they were acquired by Godrej, and Godrej is in many ways kind of offloaded that off to Mamaearth now. There is a lot of gaps. There's a lot to do there, but consolidation makes sense in many of these cases, because if you are a house of brands, you need to have enough brands there and you can bring that in. Just on the Beardo one, which I think is something to kind of note, is that if you look at what Imami and Marico have done in recent times, they've really focused on acquiring D2C brands, because that kind of helps them tap into that without building it themselves. They keep doing that. Versus what a Unilever does is Unilever really focuses on acquiring brands before they even go too much into the market. They acquire even much more earlier and kind of seep it into the mix of things. So some of these older players are doing it that way, but I think consolidation makes sense. In any case, I think it's that cycle, right? You build a lot and then you get consolidated, then you build a lot again.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I think if I had to be very critical about what went wrong in the past 12 months of aggressive fundraising by a lot of direct-to-consumer brands is, number one, let's be honest, none of them are really direct-to-consumer. There is basically, I mean, even if you look at both, we discussed
Amazon.
them. 3% of their business is truly direct-to-consumer, which is purchases off of their website. Majority of their business is driven either by marketplaces or through, offline channels where they may or may not be available. And this is, boat is one example, but you literally pick up any example under the sun of businesses that have seen hyperscale. The truth prevails no matter like who they are, right? I think the second big thing is, let's keep differentiation on the product and positioning side aside for a second. What are the channels for direct-to-consumer brands to even grow anymore? I was talking to an investor who, invests a lot in D2C, and because it's just generally sort of, catching up on what's happening in the space. And one of the biggest things that they said was it's almost as if money is being raised for money to be thrown on Facebook and Instagram. And the return on ad spends, ROAS or ROS, it's sad. Like he was giving me examples of like, some D2C brand founders think that, having a ROAS of 1 to 1.5 is good.
Explain ROAS to people who don't know ROAS.
So return on ad spend basically means if I put 1 rupee into Facebook, how much revenue am I being able to generate out of it? And revenue could be defined either as, GMV or as like net revenue. It varies from, company to company. But really the metric that it comes down to is return on spend, right? How much is it costing me to really drive sales for my brand? Am I seeing repeats? Am I not seeing repeats? And why aren't customers repeating? And I think this is the problem with money, right? The problem with money is somewhere it puts this like weird pressure on founders. Very few founders, especially first-time founders, can resist it. Where there is this thing of, if I have raised capital, the capital can't lie in my bank. I need to spend it. And unfortunately, where a lot of this money ends up getting pissed away isn't necessarily in like product development or research. It ends up being in just running ads on, Facebook and Instagram and Google and the likes. And the problem is it's a drug. I mean, it's, like we've done performance marketing for ourselves. It's very easy to, get very like enthralled and excited by frothy numbers of, your GMV growing. But bro, your GMV is obviously going to grow if you are spending copious amounts of money in driving results. In fact, I spoke with someone recently and I was appalled. This person mentioned they sell products worth like, $600-700. And they mentioned that, their cost of acquisition was close to about 1,300 rupees, which is just insane. You're selling a high margin product. Why is it costing you so much money to get that customer to come and shop from you in the first place? So I don't know, man, but I think somewhere, in this whole thing of direct to consumer businesses are not technology businesses. You have seen the, debacle that's happened at Glossier, where irrespective of takedown pieces against Emily Weiss, the truth is that they just got distracted by wanting to be a technology company because they built, because they obviously raised a shit ton of money from Sequoia. They were at a valuation of 1.8 billion. And the question being asked to them is, how do you justify this valuation? And the only way that they were being able to justify it is that we want to build an Instagram of beauty. And the next thing you know, their core business, which was their beauty business, they totally got derailed from it. So I don't know. I think, money is great. And I always encourage founders to, not like struggle unnecessarily if they don't need to. But I think unfortunately, the past year has just somewhere screwed up, fundamentals of how direct to consumer brands should be built, which is through margins, man.
And just one thing to add here is that if you look at the story about Park Avenue and MyGlam, which is supposedly what they're trying to acquire, that also shows a trend, right? Is that for you in the long term, you will still need to be in stores. In many ways, the acquisition might actually be to say, okay, can we get footprints into physical stores? Because there's an entire network they will inherit with Park Avenue. Yeah. Or other, even like just knowledge to be able to do that, right? And so in the long term, you will still need to be able to be in brick and mortar and do those stores. Yeah. You can't just rely on, like you said, just on Instagram and Facebook ads. Yeah. In that sense. But I feel it's finally going to be a bit of a wake-up call, right? You're going to take it in the right sense and not just in beauty. Even if you look at I think there's a story FMCG. About Yoga Bar as well. Yeah. Yeah, Yoga Bar, all these ones. The founders who have done well, built it over time, have been ones who still focused on core profitability. Build it like a business needs to be built, not build it for a valuation, not build it for excess money.
Yeah.
don't take too much money in that sense. Like there's a recent interview with, I think, the Sequoia global CEO or founder, I forgot who it was, and he said that raise money the same way that you would build a product step by step. Don't just say you will build the entire product on day one. You would obviously go in stages, raise money the same way. And considering this is one of the guy who's been running Sequoia globally for so long, it also shows where things are at. But speaking of Sequoia, I know that you have a story on Sequoia.
Yeah.
And we have a story we're going to discuss on Sequoia. But before that, I want to go to my next story, because we spent a lot of time on D2C. See, we're passionate about D2C, aren't we? Why did I put a random accent here? Was it an accent?
You always do that. You usually sound like a South Indian porn star, but
yes.
Yeah, now you sound like a South Indian porn star from Amsterdam.
Speaking of South Indian porn stars, a lot of us, the motherland, which is Dubai, a lot of Web3 founders seem to be moving to the motherland. It's an exodus of talent. And if you look at recent trends, there are a bunch of articles on this space as well. Is that a lot of Web3 founders are literally moving their companies in terms of where they're headquartered at, to Dubai or Singapore. You're also seeing a lot of talent who work in Web3 moving out of the country. It's been a definite trend because I think it's easier to do business in this space because the regulations here still aren't very clear. Everyone's a bit spooked in that sense. And also more favorable tax regimes in that sense of the word. So you're seeing talent and businesses which are building towards the future kind of moving out. So it's a bit worrying.
I mean, it's not just like in Web3, right? I think in general across the board, you saw, I know it's unrelated to Web3 and God knows what's really happening there. But there was a story this week about, a Manu Jain and who's still some loose designation at Xiaomi. But he, pretty much had to like pack up and move his base from India to Dubai. And
silently to Dubai last year.
Exactly. And there are all sort of underlying theories about how there was some pressure from the government and like this, that and the other. I mean, no one really knows what the truth is over there.
Yeah,
but
too many rumors there,
Yeah, but I don't know. I don't think it's only restricted to Web3. I think in general, this whole notion of India being a place where business is easy, there is more and more proof coming out that it's actually very much the opposite of exactly that.
Yeah. I think it's a few things, right? One is you went through this phase where, focus on startups kind of became a thing. Everybody saw you're opening up things. Reduce red tape was obviously a conversation. So everyone's kind of looking forward to this kind of happening. The assumption was that because Web3 is building towards the future, or any of these startups are actually building for the future in one way or the other, there would be a lot more loosening. But what seems to have happened in recent years has been a lot more tightening. Could it be the pandemic? Could it just be the fact that the taxation system as well has come under pressure because our taxes are way higher? Inflation's at the stage where it's at. I mean, if you look at petrol, diesel prices, that's a whole different thing altogether. So you are seeing people saying, okay, one second, what is the way in which I work is one, but what rules and regime do I work under? And when you can kind of put both of these together and you're looking at countries like a Dubai who's literally saying we'll open things up super low, if not like almost like it was zero tax, but obviously there is some tax component they've built into it as well. And you are not worried about any regulation coming in tomorrow, which might just make what you're building even illegal, right? And that's what happened with the whole crypto clause in the budget when it came out. So it's a lot of that, but in general, maybe it's just opportunities seem to be opening up globally again. And so while, long ago you'd have people wanting to move to America to work, and you're hearing that about Dubai and Singapore again now, and slowly to other places as well. So I think it's a mixture of that. And, but I also feel it's a lot more about just like not really getting where the economic focus is going.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think, obviously all eyes on Web3 right now, right? Because one, it's kind of like the new bastion of, hope as far as multiples are concerned. And everyone's sort of hope is that the next Facebook really comes out of all things Web3, right? Again, just the impact that, all sort of Web3 underlying technologies could have even on how payments take place. So there's basically a lot of money at stake over here. And I think, unfortunately, it's just one of those scenarios where the assumption is money is better kept, especially when there's so much riding on it, is better kept in scenarios where, you're not going to be screwed over by a temperamental government tomorrow, day after, whenever else.
It's about clarity as well, right? I mean, if you look at this, there was a Twitter thread about Dubai, but I think if you look at the fact that they actually created a virtual assets regulatory authority in Dubai, it does not stop any innovation in it. It's just that they want to bring some form of framework for it versus what we had announced, which said that this is not a currency. It's just about how you go about it.
Yeah.
If you go about it from a slightly more, we're going to put an iron fist into this scenario versus, okay, we're just going to help you kind of grow, but within a framework. I feel it's just the process of that. And also, like, Dubai has no personal income tax. So I'm just saying, considering how much income tax we end up paying.
Yeah.
And you look out the window, you're wondering, where is all that tax going? But that's a whole different conversation altogether. We're not a political show, but we will not talk about it.
And we will get cancelled for this conversation. But there are a bunch of people getting cancelled. And ladies and gents, this is my final story for today, which is, obviously there was this whole furor that happened on the internet because a bunch of companies have been under the scanner. So Trell was under the scanner. Zilingo, there was massive drama happening over there, which we discussed loosely last week with, the CEO sort of being put on leave of absence and multiple board members stepping down. You had that massive saga happening at Bharat Pay, which just unearthed like a full-on can of worms. And long story short, the one common connect in between a lot of these scandals seem to be Sequoia, who obviously are one of the largest investors, not just in the world, but in India. And to be fair, I think a lot of the Indian startup ecosystem's growth is courtesy the punt that Sequoia made, in India, right? Possibly put some of the largest checks in Indian companies. All your most of your IPOs had Sequoia, somewhere there or the other. And obviously, if you're investing in hundreds of companies over a life cycle of a decade-ish old fund in India, there are always going to be bad eggs, right? But what we guys are talking about today really is that, letter of call to governance. If you haven't read it, ladies and gents, you truly must. But the question I want to ask you is, Varun, when you reflect on, Sequoia's narrative as a counter narrative to all the, sort of stories coming out around Sequoia, a couple of them published on the Morning Context, what do you think this letter was? Do you think it was a PR bust or a PR boom?
I feel it kind of played in between somewhere there. It wasn't like, oh my God, this changes everything about how I perceived all this stuff happening. It doesn't put them in a bad light as well. I think it was well thought out. It was pretty level-headed in that sense of the word. It also kind of widely shared by a bunch of founders on Twitter as well. But I feel more than anything else, Sequoia at some point, I think it needs to also kind of, because they've been the ones who really driven this in the market over the last many years. It's also been a case of like across the board investments happening very quickly with little due diligence, not as much focus on how companies are run versus just pure growth and profitability. I think we're at that point when that focus is going to slightly shift. I don't think it will shift too much. Everybody will still want as much growth as possible, as much profitability as possible. We cannot assume that corporate governance will suddenly become the primary focus. That's never going to happen.
Yeah.
But it is going to now be a point. And we're at that, I'd say it is that juncture where it is going to be a line item that is going to be a focus area. Till now, I don't think it was at all.
Which is kind of shocking, right? How has it not been a line item so far? And again, a lot of it just comes from, unfortunately, like the pace at which funding cycles happen, right? Like before this winter that hit everyone in July to December of last year was bonkers. And the kind of stories that I was seeing coming out of the ecosystem were also even more bonkers, where people were getting term sheets in record time. There was a lot of cross-selling and upselling of offers and this, that and the other. And I want to sort of circle back to the letter. I don't know. I have so much respect for so many of, the partners at Sequoia, but I found that whole narrative that came out, thanks to obviously the big issues at Zilingo, largely triggered by that. I found the whole narrative way too manufactured. That this letter was basically pushed out, by india.sequoiacap.com, which basically means it was essentially like a, PR sort of push. It didn't come from any of the partners. There's also this weird thing where Shilinder Singh, who was on the board of Zilingo and obviously has a phenomenal reputation as a, investor. A bunch of my friends who, have raised money from him speak very highly about him. He, went and started deleting tweets that he had posted earlier, praising Ankiti Bose. And then you suddenly had, someone, and I'm not saying Sanjeev Bikhchandani was a part of this in any way whatsoever, but, in a very timely way, he kind of retweeted retweeted this with this whole, narrative on how the burden of governance actually falls on the founder and it's the founder's job to, do this well. And then you had a lot of Sequoia founders. I don't know. It just seems so calculated. And I think in scenarios like this, when you've been caught with your pants down, right? And I'm not saying any of this is Sequoia's fault or not fault, but that they were a part of the narrative. I think the best way to deal with scenarios like this, if you want to do PR well, is come from a place of authenticity. And my challenge with their whole PR strategy, keeping the truth and the lies behind this aside, because God alone knows, who was right or wrong in this scenario. But keeping that aside, I just found the whole thing so like poorly manufactured. So I don't know, man, but not the best work done by their marketing and comms people.
So here's the thing with comms, especially in scenarios like this, right? I'm just coming primarily from the comms side, is that it will come down to saying, can you put down the least, like, because the problem with authentic in these cases is that something you put out authentically might be misconstrued or taken into a certain direction. So what ends up coming eventually is you will have lines taken out, you will have things kind of watered down a little bit. The first reaction I had was that middle median which they've taken. Could they have taken the other direction? Yes, but you never know what comes out of that. So as an organization like Sequoia and anything which is a global organization, you need to kind of take that one point where you're not going into a chance even of something you said coming back to kind of smack you on the face, which is why they would have taken this. But I agree with you, it doesn't do as much as it can.
It's simple things like, why isn't that letter signed off by, Mohit Bhatnagar or whoever else, right? Why isn't that you know what I mean? Like, it's gone out as a corporate statement. It hasn't gone out as, there is a collective ownership that needs to be taken by all parties. In fact, there was some language in the, letter which was very like legal. So like in the, note that they posted, right?
I do agree on one thing, that the buck will eventually stop at the founder.
Which it should.
You have chosen to take the money. You have done what you've done.
Yeah.
You can't blame who gave you the money for things.
Oh, 100%.
What you said is important. That at some point, when you pull the plug is important. And I feel in many of these cases, the plug was pulled a little late.
Yeah.
And not as early as it should have been in that sense of the word. So that
and
I
just want to
totally
add
agree
one
with.
last thing over here, right? Like, I saw the last episode of We Crashed, which is that excellent sort of show on Apple TV Plus.
I haven't seen it yet.
Oh, so good. So I saw the last episode, right? And the last episode basically has this, and spoiler alert, but like the last episode, literally like the finale part, has a part where Masayoshi Son, who runs SoftBank and was one of the largest investors in WeWork, and quite fairly like really pumped them up and made them this like bloated machine.
Gave into that God complex.
Yeah, exactly. So whatever. So basically, he came up with this deal to get Adam Newman out of WeWork, right? And long story short, the deal that he came up with, he never ended up paying Adam Newman that money. And the scene sort of ends with Rebecca Newman and Adam Newman crying because the deal that Masayoshi Son said he'd cut out for them, which would basically give them $975 million, that goes kaput. And like, and there's this like line that it's obviously all made up, but there's this line that he says, where he basically says that, in a fight, who wins, the smart one or the crazy one? And he asks Rebecca Newman to answer. And then he basically says, no one wins. It's always the one with the most amount of money. And he hangs up the phone. And I think, tying that back to the Sequoia thing, I mean, at the end of the day, the guys with the most amount of money, which whether we like it or not, are the VCs, will always win. But founders, do the right thing and have your own back.
Yes. Speaking of having your own back, we always got your back with recommendations. But before we give you our recommendations and my dog stop barking, we will go for a break. We'll be right back. Think fast.
Namaste, this is Cyrus Brocha. I am part of the government cancel culture program to remove rubbish off all the different streams available. So what we have is all the collected rubbish we put together on our show. It's called Cyrus Says. It's on IVM Podcasts. You have to watch it and listen to it. It's on our app. It's on our website. It's on the YouTube channel. It's on Facebook. There are many different ways. Don't bother me and ask me how. You have to find out. We talk to different personalities. Many of them are known. Some are just people we meet downstairs and invite them up for chai. But the point is, it's fun and it's very therapeutic. So please join in and listen to Cyrus Says.
Welcome back to Think Fast. It is time for recommendations, and I don't know why I'm again doing a voice. I think at some point of time I might just be able to do like an entire show where I do all the voices of all the characters. I think I should do that.
Yes, we should come up with.
I'll come up with my own version of like South Park.
Do it. Oh my God.
Hey man, what's going on?
The worst South Park there ever was. But what are you recommending this week, Varun? Let's round this up.
What am I recommending? I actually have a recommendation, which is not really a recommendation. I would say that read a book you enjoy again. I've actually been reading a book which I really like again. And I realize that oftentimes you go looking for newer things to consume. I'm actually rereading a book called Stillness is the Key, one of my favorite books on Stoicism. And I realized there's so many things I hadn't underlined the first time I read it. For the second time, underlining a lot more things there. Oh, and it's World Book Day today. Jealous me. Thank you for letting us know. See, unintentionally. I have, maybe I can give more book recommendations, but this is my recommendation. Read a book you enjoy again. Don't find a new book only.
Yes. And talking about things that I enjoy, I love Selling Sunset, which is like the world's best, trashiest show you could ever see. So, and guys, the Selling Sunset season 5 is out on Netflix, and that is where my weekend is going. Rest in peace to me, myself, with my Selling Sunset.
I have to watch that show. I haven't watched it yet.
Oh my God, it's
basically
so
real
bad.
estate, right?
Great.
It's real estate.
Yeah. It's like cool chicks and real estate and a lot of drama and all like reality television. It's better than The Kardashians, which is also available on Amazon Prime for those of you who keep a track of all things Kardashians. But yes, Selling Sunset is back, ladies and gents. Chica, yeah.
Also, I'll give a recommendation next week. There's an interesting recommendation coming next week, but because it involves me, but that I will only tell next week.
Oh my God. Guys, Varun is going to plug in another product up next week. Aao hi mat. Aap yehi episode sun lo and revisit all our past episodes because there will be more product plugging in coming. But guys,
no, it's going to be a lovely event.
58 minutes. We are on a streak.
Amazing. Next time we will do 57 minutes.
Yes. Bit by bit till it becomes 45 minutes.
Okay, total.
Bye.
Hey, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Advertising is Dead, Varun talks to co-founder and CEO of Yoga Bar, Suhasini Sampath. She shares the secrets behind making energy bars without preservatives. On Voices for Water, Karthik asks Dr. Bhakti Devi, founding president Water Resources Council, about water literacy in India. On Ek Chuski Finance, Priyanka explains the concept of a financial slam book. On Pulyabazi, Pranay and Saurabh ponder over how the Indian armed forces can reduce the cost of pensions. And on Marathi Kirkiton, the Deshmukhs explore the works of the popular writer Ramchandra Chintaman Dere. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. Also, please don't forget to rate us on any of the platforms you're listening to us on. And remember, you can always check us out on YouTube. We have a number of channels. You can go to ivmpodcast.com/YouTube to take a look at what those channels are. We're also doing a small listener survey to understand how you respond to our shows and the advertising on the network. We would really, really appreciate it if you could spare a few minutes to fill it out. It really helps us build better shows for you and understand what you're looking for from advertising and what we can talk to advertisers about who you are. Please go to ivmpodcast.com/survey. It really, really, really would help us out. Thank you so much. And finally, would like to thank our sponsors for the network this week, SBI Life Insurance, India Water Portal, and Jupiter, a digital banking app. Thank you so much for making this possible.
If you're a cricket fan, check out Edges and Sledges, India's favorite cricket podcast.
The podcast focuses on Indian cricket, the IPL, and has a ton of banter both on and off the field.
We talk about the week's biggest cricket stories with current and ex-international cricketers, coaches, or sometimes just between us.
And it's hosted by me, DJ.
Me, Varun.
And me, Ashwin.
New episodes release every week.
You can catch us on the IVM Podcasts website, app,
or wherever you get your podcasts from.
Check out the Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast.